I still keep the unopened envelope in the top drawer of my desk. It is empty now, but the day it arrived at my parents' showroom, my mother dropped her phone, my sister stopped smiling, and my father called me 13 times in less than an hour. Until that morning, they had spent years treating me like the daughter who should be grateful just to be included. They never imagined I was the one thing holding their whole world up. My name is Elena, and for most of my life, my family had a role ready for me before I even opened my mouth. My father, Richard, was the face of the family business. He knew how to shake hands, how to charm investors, how to stand in the middle of a room and make every story sound like it ended because of him. My mother, Diane, handled appearances. She knew who to invite, what to wear, what to say, and exactly how long to smile before it started to look fake. My younger sister Claire was the polished one. On social media, she made our furniture showroom look like a dream people could walk into and buy. And then there was me. I was the daughter people forgot to mention unless they needed something explained, solved, or paid for. I worked in commercial real estate. I understood leases, debt, title chains, tax exposure, and what happened when a business kept pretending it was stable while the numbers said otherwise. My family liked to call that boring. My father used to say I had made a career out of paperwork because I did not know how to do anything beautiful. Claire once laughed and said I worked with buildings because people were easier to disappoint than concrete. I wish I could say those comments rolled off me. They did not. They just settled somewhere deep and quiet, where old hurts go when you still want the people causing them to love you. That is the trap a lot of capable people fall into. They think if they are useful enough, calm enough, generous enough, eventually someone will call that love. So they carry more, they fix more, they wait longer. What they do not see, at least not right away, is that usefulness and respect are not the same thing. A family can depend on you every day and still refuse to honor you. A family can trust your labor more than anyone else's and still treat your presence like an afterthought. Looking back, that was my place in the house and in the business. I was not celebrated. I was absorbed. 6 years before everything blew up, our family showroom was close to collapse. A landlord dispute had gone bad. The vendor terms were tightening. The business had taken on short-term pressure to survive a long-term problem, which is how fragile companies usually convince themselves they are still strong. My father told everyone it was a temporary rough patch. It was not. The bank was nervous. The building lease was turning ugly. One missed season could have pushed the whole thing over. So I stepped in, not with advice, not with moral support, with money, structure, and risk. Through a holding company, I bought the building the flagship showroom operated from. I covered back-end obligations my parents barely understood. I negotiated vendor terms. I stabilized the occupancy situation. I backed the inventory line personally when no one else in the family could have done it cleanly. The brand survived because I built a floor under it. But from the outside, none of that changed the performance. My father still gave interviews. My mother still hosted charity lunches. Claire still posed under chandeliers and wrote captions about legacy, taste, and family vision. And because I kept things quiet, they began to act as if quiet meant small. That is another thing people misunderstand about family businesses. The prettiest part is rarely the strongest part. Customers see polished windows and perfect lighting. They see holiday displays and smiling faces. They do not see who signed the guarantee. They do not see who covered the tax bill, who negotiated the emergency extension, who took the call no one wanted to answer. Real power often sits in the least glamorous place in the room, the person attached to risk. My family never learned that lesson because they never had to. So they thought the business survived because it belonged to them by nature. They confused inheritance with competence. They confused access with ownership. Most dangerous of all, they confused my silence with permission. For 6 years, they paid almost nothing for a building they did not own. For 6 years, they benefited from decisions they barely noticed. And for 6 years, I let it happen because I told myself it was temporary, that once things were stable, we would sit down like adults and fix the structure. We never did. At family dinners, I was still the one at the edge of the table. In group photos, I stood where it was easiest to crop me out. When my father praised the business, he praised vision. When my mother praised our family, she praised grace. When Claire spoke about hard work, she meant content shoots, showroom events, and dealing with difficult clients. None of them meant the boring, costly, invisible work that kept the walls from closing in on all of us. I noticed it. I swallowed it. I told myself that being needed was close enough to being loved. It was not. Christmas proved that. My parents always hosted Christmas morning like it was a staged event. Wrapped boxes under a tall tree, music low in the background, coffee that no one really drank because the point was not warmth. The point was presentation. My father handed out gifts slowly like he was distributing favor. My mother watched people's reactions the way some people watch ratings. Claire filmed part of it for a story she never posted, probably because reality ruined the mood. My mother got earrings. Claire got a designer bag. Claire's fiancé, Daniel, has got a watch my father claimed he had picked out himself. Staff members who were close to the family received curated gift baskets. Even the driver took home something expensive enough to be mentioned twice. I sat there with a mug between both hands and waited for my name. It never came. At first, I thought maybe they had saved mine for last. Then I thought maybe someone had misplaced it. Then I realized there had never been one. When I asked, lightly, whether there had been a mix-up, my mother looked at me with that thin expression she used whenever she wanted to punish me without raising her voice. She said, "Why would there be a gift for you? You are here every year anyway." Claire laughed. Not a loud laugh, a soft one, the kind people use when they want cruelty to sound casual. Then she said, "Honestly, Elena, you always act like effort deserves applause." My father did not correct either of them. He just adjusted his cuff and told everyone to open their boxes. The room did not explode. No one shouted. That almost made it worse. Some injuries become final because of how ordinary they are when they happen. I remember hearing paper tear. I remember someone thanking my mother. I remember Daniel glancing at me, then at Claire, like he was trying to decide whether he had misunderstood the room. That was the moment something in me stopped begging for a different ending. There is a role some families assign you without asking. The fixer, the steady one, the child who keeps the peace, carries the load, and accepts less because there is always a bigger fire somewhere else. That role comes with obligation, but not with dignity. You are expected to be useful, not seen. The day you step out of it, they call you selfish, cold, dramatic. What they really mean is this: the arrangement no longer works for them. I stood up, set my mug down, told them to enjoy the rest of the morning, and left. No one followed me to the door. I drove home in complete silence, not because I was trying to calm down, because I was done negotiating with a version of reality that only existed inside that family. By the time I reached my condo, the hurt had sharpened into sequence. First, I pulled up the deed, then the transfer records, then the vendor correspondence, then the insurance file, the property tax payments, the line of credit renewal, the emergency repair approvals, and the trademark assignment my grandmother had signed years earlier when she lost confidence in my father and wanted someone responsible attached to the future of the brand. I did not call the family attorney. I called mine. By that evening, we had a list. By the next morning, we had a strategy. By Monday, we had documents ready to send. The inventory line backed by my guarantee would no longer be supported by me. The month-to-month occupancy arrangement would be terminated according to law. Unauthorized use of the brand outside the scope of enforceable rights would be challenged. Every courtesy I had extended quietly would now be replaced with paper. I asked my attorney to send the notice in a cream envelope inside a white gift box. Maybe that sounds petty. Maybe it was. But symbols matter when someone has spent years reducing you to one. The package arrived at the showroom just after opening. According to one of the staff members, Claire opened it first because she thought it might be a late holiday delivery. She saw the first page and went still. My mother took the stack from her, read 2 paragraphs, and dropped her phone. My father was called from the design office and started making calls before he finished reading the last page. I know because by the time I checked my phone at 10:30, I had 13 missed calls, 4 voicemails, and 3 texts that shifted tone so fast they almost read like a psychological case study. First came anger. "What kind of stunt is this?" Then denial. You cannot do this to your own family. Then strategy. Let's talk before anyone overreacts. And finally, fear. Stop hiding in politeness. There must be some misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. There was just a truth they had lived above for years without ever looking down. Families can get away with lies for a long time because they control the language inside the house. Cruelty becomes honesty. Exclusion becomes teasing. Exploitation becomes duty. But the system gets unstable when an outsider hears the same words and reacts like a normal person. That is exactly what started happening. Daniel called me that afternoon. He spoke carefully, as if he knew every word mattered. He said, "Elena, I do not want to get in the middle of this, but were you really the one carrying the building?" I told him yes. He asked if Claire knew. I said, "She knew enough to ask fewer questions than she should have." There was a long pause on the line. That pause told me more than anything he actually said. Someone outside the family loop had just seen the mismatch between status and substance, and once that happens, the performance starts to crack. The next day, my parents came to my condo with Claire and Daniel. My father knocked like he still believed volume could produce authority. My mother wore the face she used for charity events, the one that said reason and restraint while promising neither. Claire looked offended in a way that only entitled people can when the floor stops moving under their feet exactly when they expect it to. Daniel looked tired. He did not say much. My father started with legacy. He always did when he needed other people to confuse emotion with entitlement. He said, "We built this together." I asked, "Which part did you build together? The part where you let me carry the risk, or the part where you left me out on Christmas morning?" My mother stepped in and called Christmas a misunderstanding. I asked her whether I had misunderstood not receiving a gift, or whether I had misunderstood being told I was here every year anyway. Claire rolled her eyes and said I was making a scene out of a joke. That almost made me laugh. People who rely on your silence are always startled by your memory. I told them the documents were valid, enforceable, and already in motion. If they wanted to discuss transition terms, they could do it through counsel. If they wanted to insult me in my own home, they could leave sooner. That was when my father lost the calm act. He said there was no building without him. I told him there was no showroom in that building without me. Claire said I was jealous because I had never been the public face of the brand. I asked her one question. Whose guarantee do you think kept your winter inventory line open when the bank got nervous 3 years ago? She looked at my father. That was answer enough. After that, the story they told about me got uglier. My mother called relatives and suggested I was having some kind of emotional collapse. My father told vendors I was trying to pressure the business because I resented the family. Claire started posting vague lines online about loyalty, envy, and betrayal, hoping other people would fill in the blanks in her favor. For a few days, some people did. That is the power of a polished family. They get believed longer than they deserve. Then they overplayed it. Their attorney sent mine a packet claiming the building had always been intended as a shared family asset, and that my holding company had been used for tax positioning. The packet included meeting minutes and internal approvals I had supposedly signed years earlier. I had never seen them before in my life. My attorney called me within 20 minutes and said, "Do not panic. This is either reckless or stupid." It was both. The signatures were wrong in the subtle ways forged signatures often are. Too careful, too slow, too aware of themselves. The dates conflicted with documented transfers and bank correspondence. The timeline did not fit the actual crisis sequence. It was not just dishonest. It was clumsy. That was the moment my anger changed shape. Until then, I had felt insulted, used, and erased. Now I felt clarified. A family can wound you and still leave room for doubt. Fraud strips that room bare. There is something almost merciful about evidence. People rewrite memory to protect pride. They soften what they said. They deny what they took. They retell the story until the person who carried the burden sounds selfish for naming it. But paper does not love anyone enough to lie. Records do not care who cries louder. A deed does not shift because a father feels humiliated. A payment history does not disappear because a mother says family should matter more than contracts. For people who have spent years being told they are too sensitive, proof becomes more than proof. It becomes recovery. My attorney assembled everything: transfer records, payment logs, communications tied to the occupancy arrangement, so renewal documents on the credit exposure I had guaranteed, trademark assignment paperwork from my grandmother, emails from vendors who had dealt with me directly during the crisis years. We did not need drama. We needed sequence. Once the bank understood I was withdrawing support, their posture changed. Expansion chatter stopped. 2 supplier shipments were delayed pending review. 1 long-term vendor asked for reassurance the company could still meet revised terms. Daniel called me again after that, this time sounding less uncertain and more ashamed on behalf of everyone sitting under the same family name. He asked if Claire had known how serious things were. I said, serious enough to keep posting holiday decor while other people were keeping the lights on. A few days later, their engagement pictures vanished from her page. The hearing itself was not theatrical. That mattered to me. Real humiliation often sounds plain. My father tried to make it sound like a family misunderstanding that had gotten too formal. My mother sat with the expression of a woman who still believed disappointment should count as evidence. Claire looked furious, then confused, then frightened, depending on who was speaking. Their attorney did what he could, but once documents start disagreeing with your story in 4 different ways, charm becomes an expensive hobby. The judge reviewed the ownership chain, the occupancy posture, the support structure, the guarantee history, and the trademark record. My side was coherent because it was true. Their side kept reaching for a moral argument to rescue a legal weakness. It did not work. The ruling confirmed my rights. See, control of the property was mine. The occupancy arrangement could be terminated. Use of the brand had limits they could not ignore. Questions around the fabricated materials would be referred onward. I did not smile in court. I did not need to. Something inside me had already gone quiet in the best way, not numb, settled. Outside the courthouse, my father asked me whether I was really going to destroy the family over paperwork. That sentence tells you everything about people like him. They call your labor paperwork. They call your boundaries destruction. They call your memory cruelty. Anything to avoid naming what actually happened. I told him the family had survived every time I covered for it. What was ending now was not the family, it was access. Since the final month before they vacated the building was ugly in the unglamorous way endings often are. Staff started leaving, vendors got cautious. A seasonal launch was canceled. My mother withdrew from social events where people had begun asking soft questions with sharp edges. Claire stopped posting inside the showroom. My father tried to act confident in public, but his timing had changed. Even confidence has a limp when creditors are watching. When the move-out date arrived, I went with my attorney and a locksmith. The place looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe all myths do when they are emptying out. There were damaged pieces in the back, mislabeled inventory, loose tags, half-packed shelves, and the stale smell of a room that had been trying to look open while quietly closing. On the center table sat a white box. Inside was a blank gift tag. No name, no message. Just a small piece of thick paper left there like a final insult, or maybe a confession from someone who still did not understand what had happened. Claire had written one line on a card beneath it. Some things never change. She was wrong. The whole point was that something had. I kept the tag. 4 months later, I sold the building to a hospitality group for more than my father had once claimed the entire business was worth. I retired the old showroom name instead of letting it drag itself through another imitation of prestige. I licensed selected legacy designs from my grandmother's archive under a new arrangement that actually respected where the value came from. My father moved the remnants of the business into a smaller space outside the center district. It never recovered. My mother's world got quieter. Claire's partnerships dried up. Daniel left before the wedding invitations were printed. My father wrote to me 3 times in the year that followed. The first letter accused me of betrayal. The second asked whether I was satisfied. The third wanted to know when I had become so cold. I did not answer any of them, because by then I understood something I wish I had learned earlier. People who benefit from your overfunctioning will always call your boundaries cruelty. Not because they cannot see the difference, but because seeing it would force them to rewrite themselves. I built a new firm after that. Smaller at first, then steady, then respected. I work with ownership disputes, fractured partnerships, and family businesses that confuse sentiment with structure. Sometimes my clients cry in my office because for the first time, someone is naming the thing they have been living inside. They say things like, "I thought I was overreacting. I thought maybe I just was not grateful enough. I thought if I kept helping, they would finally see me." I never tell them healing is easy. It is not. But I do tell them this: being needed is not the same as being loved, and being useful is not the same as being safe. The blank gift tag hangs in a frame near my desk now. Most people think it is abstract art until I explain it. To me, it means something simple. It means there was a day when the people closest to me tried to reduce me to an omission. No name, no place, no claim. And it means they failed. Because in the end, what held up was not their version of me. It was the truth. Quiet, documented. But patient truth. The kind that survives after the smiles fade, after the lies get tired, after the room is finally empty enough to hear yourself clearly. And once you hear yourself clearly, you stop asking people who used you to tell you who you are.